Welcome back to Faith and Cigars. This is my first video for 2026, and so I've been recording this video a couple times, and so I have been smoking the, let's see if I can get it to display here, the Knuckle Sandwich by Espinosa. This is Guy Fieri's cigar, and it comes in three versions. It comes in the Habano, the Maduro, which I'm smoking, and the Puro. And of the three, I like the Habano the best. But what I want to talk about today in this episode is experiencing a knuckle sandwich in the ministry. And this cigar is strong and spicy, and I suppose ministry can be a lot like that. And if you're not new to the channel, you know that I often smoke my cigars in my mobile cigar lounge, but my mobile cigar lounge took a dive. The Suburban croaked finally, so I got a new mobile cigar lounge, and so this is my first episode in it. And so in this episode, I want to talk about, like I said, how lonely and painful the ministry can be. And if you're a pastor out there, I want to know what you feel about the ministry and how you would respond to this situation. So I originally told this whole story, but then after thinking about it, I decided not to. But I do want to share my guttural response to the situation, and then get your thoughts, what you think about this. The ministry is, like I said, lonely, and part of that is because it's hard to be your authentic self in the ministry when you're up there at the pulpit. People make assumptions about you and who you are, and and if you set yourself up as the man of God, well then you kind of have to hide who you really are, and that's not how I want to be as a ministry, and that's how I run my ministry. But anyway, we had a couple and their family come to the church, and we baptized them, we made them members, and then we gave them leadership roles. So this family kind of started to get in conflict with the church a little bit, and they stopped not coming as much, and they stopped responding to text messages and phone calls, and so I knew there was an issue there, and I kept inviting them in to come have a conversation. Let's talk about this. And I think a lot of the conflict was around a new associate pastor we got. But at any rate, we needed to follow up on something related to the church and the facilities. So we reached out to the guy to get information, and his response back was really disappointing, to say the least. He basically sent us a nasty text message that was absolutely disrespectful, and his parting comment was, "I'll just take my family and leave." And my guttural response was like, basically, well, screw you then. I didn't put that in there. I didn't reply. I replied back to him. I'm not going to. Hopefully, I can have a one-on-one conversation with him face to face. And my wife had a good response. She said, "Well, just tell them that if they, the most important thing is they grow in Christ, they grow in their relationship with the Lord. So, maybe you need to go somewhere where you can grow." And to me, that's kind of a cop-out. They made a commitment to the church. And in our church, we have a church covenant. And part of that has some commitments, which is, when there's problems, to come and talk to us. And so, anyway, I want to know how you respond to these kind of betrayals in the ministry. Feels like a Judas Kiss, doesn't it? You bring people in, you make them part of the team, and then they betray you, and man, it really hurts. And So I was curious how you respond to that as a pastor. Luckily for me, I do have a team, accountability team of leaders in the church that not only hold me accountable as a pastor, but I can use them as a sounding board, and I've been able to talk to them and kind of vent a little bit about how I'm feeling about the situation. But man, it really does make me feel I could relate to Jesus, not only with Judas and the betrayal, the kiss, but when in John 6:66, when majority of his disciples up and leave of the many disciples, I definitely can relate to that feeling, and then turning to the remaining few and saying, "Hey, are you going to leave me too?" And honestly, I don't know how to process the whole situation, and there's a lot more involved in this story, obviously, and for the sake of the all involved, I'm not going to give a lot of detail, but man, it really hurts, doesn't it? You're going back to Jesus and Judas and knowing that he's going to betray you. Now, of course, I didn't know that was going to happen. How do you respond? You got someone on the team, they're part of the inner circle because you make them part of your. In my case, I made them part of my board, and then they give you a kiss and stab you in the back. It really hurts, and in all this, found out that another pastor was kind of undermining us, not in our church but outside of our church, and that hurt too, and obviously I pray for them, I forgive them, and I wish them well whatever happens, but honestly, I don't know how to respond. I mean, I'm trying to respond with as much grace as I can, but in my own flesh. But if you're a pastor, how have you responded to that? And if you're not a pastor, are you afraid to come and talk to your leadership? Because I think part of the problem with this family is that, thinking about their past history and the kind of churches they've gone to, I could see them being afraid to come and talk to leadership. They're afraid that they're not going to be believed or listened to, or they'll be judged as whatever, and I don't think our church would do that. Not my current leadership. I got a good team of leaders right now, and so I could understand that, And as a pastor, how do you process that? I'm trying to think, a teaching moment from Jesus' experience being betrayed, by the many that left in John chapter 6, and then his disciples who scatter at his crucifixion, and Judas's kiss. And I think thinking about Jesus and Peter, right, and Peter's denial, and then Peter being repentant, and Jesus restores him to ministry. I want that to be my posture, but maybe that opportunity won't happen, and that's hard because you can't close that loop. We had another conflict in church, and again, where a family won't come talk to us. They're still attending, and it's hard to close that loop, to have that reconciliation if people aren't going to come and talk to you. And kudos to Peter for willing to have a conversation with Jesus, but I'm curious, how do you respond to that? I think about Jesus and how gracious he is. I mean, he spoke the hard things to Peter, right? At that moment when he restores him, and Peter's pushing back and said, well, what about him? What about them? And, Jesus deflects that and just focuses on Peter, and he makes that a redemptive moment. But what do you do when there isn't a redemptive moment, when there can't be reconciliation? I guess in you as a leader, you have to be forgiving and gracious, and find some way to kind of close the circle in your own mind and heart. And that, I think, is kind of hard to do. So if you're a pastor, how do you respond to that, right? How have you responded to people hurting you and betraying you in the ministry? And, that's kind of the hard thing. And how do you process that? You know, I have a team and I have friends. I have really good friends that I can share with, you know, my thoughts and feelings and about all that. But share with me what you think. And if you like this content and you want to think about faith and cigars, even strong and spicy cigars like the ministry is, give me your thoughts and your feedback. Thank you very much. And I hope you guys have a good day. Like and subscribe. God bless you.